Chapter 2 Residential Condos of the Residential Real Estate Transaction. So, the previous chapter, chapter 1, we talked about the single family homes and the various options or single family dwelling units. In this chapter, we are going to talk about the residential condos. So, with regards to a residential condo, it's important to note that the condominium ownership represents a major sector in Ontario real estate market. Condos have a broad special appeal, ranging from a luxury downtown accommodations to a recreational lakeside suites and retirement villas. So we are going to talk about the basic concept and legal structures underlying a condominium creation. We'll describe the planning and construction considerations relevant to a condominium creation. We'll identify and describe different types of condominium corporation. We'll discuss the role and responsibilities of board of directors in governing condominium. We'll compare agreement of purchase and sale, OREO Form 100 with OREO Form 101, which is specifically for condominium resale. Outline the overall structure and purpose of a status certificate in marketing resale condominium, and identify selected issues impacting the listing and selling of resale residential condominium, including the use restrictions, owner alterations, and reserve fund, and analyze situations involving the listing and sale of residential resale circumstances, including appropriate agreements. So let's begin. Creating a condominium. A condominium is created at law through the registration of a declaration, often said as a constitution, and a description. So there are two important aspects. There is one which is declaration. The other one is description. A declaration, also called as a constitution, contains both required and optional information set out in the Condominium Act. So it will have like statement that the Condominium Act governs with the consent of the registered mortgagee, proportionate share of common elements appertaining to each unit, proportionate contribution of the unit owners to common expenses, corporation addresses for services, common elements for designated unit, and any condition required by the approving authority. The description contains a series of plans, surveys, and specifications describing the property and structures, together with certificates attesting to compliance and accuracy, which includes a planner's survey, architecture plans, a certificate of architect, unit boundaries, unit shape, dimensions, and location, structural plans, and certificate of engineer, certificate of Ontario land surveyor. All interests are pertinent to the land that is included in the property. And again, documentation can vary based on the property. There are a bunch of Planning Act requirements. Essentially, the initial step involves obtaining necessary approvals under the Planning Act, and the application process under Section 51 of the Planning Act requires the municipalities to submit a pre-submission consultation, and once that is done, then there's the notion of a draft plan and the final approval. Our draft plan is submitted when the application is submitted with the application and circulated to the appropriate persons and public agencies that may have interest in the application. These stakeholders may require additional studies in order for the support of the application, like traffic, environmental, and the noise impact. The range of studies required is normally addressed at the pre-submission consultation. A site audit is sometimes required, which includes detailed grading, drainage, landscape, and lighting plans. Registration occurs when the Ministry of Municipal Affairs and Housing and the local municipalities are satisfied that everything has been completed in accordance with Ontario Building Code and Ontario Fire Code, and everything contained in the declaration and description have been provided. Once completed, the final plan is approved and registered. Registered interested in detailed procedure for draft approval, final approval, and the registration should contact the local municipalities. Construction requirement: all condominium must comply with the Ontario Building Code. If a residential condominium is being built, developer must meet the various requirements set out by the Trillion Warranty Corporation. So essentially, Trillion Warranty Corporation warrants the construction of a new homes. So if a building is a high-rise condominium project that falls under Part 2 of the Ontario Building Code, the developer must comply with the designs and review requirement set out by TRIAN. Uh, this may also apply to when building a low-rise condominium, which has elements falling under Part 3 of the building code at the discretion of the registrar. Note that Part 3 of the Ontario Building Code focuses on construction component involved in high-rise buildings, while Part 9 focuses on housing and small buildings which are like less than 3-storied. Condominium registration. Part 3 of the Ontario Building Code so essentially the condominium registration is done when a condominium is created in law, when both declaration and description are registered. The individual who holds the freehold or the leasehold interest in the land is known as the declarant. The declarant invokes the Condominium Act through this registration process. The registered encumbrances such as the mortgage or lien holders must consent in the declaration to the invocation of the Act. A corporation without share capital is automatically formed upon incorporation, in which the members are the unit owners, except the common element condominium. Common element condominium are the one in which there is no notion of a separate unit. All that is there in the condominium is a common element, like a golf course, right? The land registrar for the applicable land registry office gives the corporation a name and a sequence number. The object of the corporation center on the management of the property and the corporation assets. These functions are paid for by the unit owners through the common expenses in proportion specified in the declaration. The corporation has a duty to affect unit owner compliance under the Act, the declaration and the bylaws, and has the power to own, acquire, encumber, and dispose of real and personal property according to the bylaws. The corporation does not provide limited liability. The unit owners are personally liable for all the debt and obligations of the condominium corporation. Condominium structures and types. The condominium corporations are divided into units and common elements. Owners exclusively occupy their respective units while being tenant in common in the common element. Parking and storage assets areas may or may not be included with the unit. If parking and storage are provided, owners may own such facilities, lease them, be granted exclusive right to use, or simply be assigned such facilities on a discretionary basis. Most parking and storage unit in Ontario condominium are either owned or exclusively used. Unit. A unit is that portion of the property so designated in the description and broadly described as the space defined by boundaries including all the land, structure, and fixtures within the defined space. For the purpose of the Act, all units are deemed to be the property of each owner, having exclusive ownership and the use of his or her unit. Units are clearly differentiated from the common elements, which are held by the owner as tenanted common. In proportion to as set out in the declaration, a common element condominium does not have any units. Common element. The common element consists of all property within the condominium corporation except the unit. The clear delineation of units versus common element is essential. The board of directors may make an addition, alteration, or improvement to the common elements without the owner's approval, unless the owner requisition a meeting and the vote against the proposed work. Addition, alteration, and improvement of residential nature requires approval of the owners who own 60% of the unit. Owners may make addition, alteration, and improvement to the common elements, but are subject to the board's approval, a formal agreement, and other criteria set out in the Act. Parking. Parking may be allowed in or on the unit, on the common elements, or an exclusive area within those common elements, depending on the declaration established for the condominium. Parking spaces are generally grouped into 4 types. Freehold parking, where the unit owner owns a parking space, either within the unit description or separately titled. Leasehold, where the condominium corporation retains the parking spaces and leases them to unit owners. Exclusive use common element. The condominium corporation owns the parking space but grants the right to use specific space as set out in the declaration. Condominium corporation owns the parking space and assigns space to unit owners on a discretionary basis. The storage locker, as with the parking spaces, can be grouped under 4 categories. freehold in which the unit owners own the storage locker, leasehold in which the condominium corporation retains ownership and leases to unit owners, exclusive use common elements in which the right to specific locker space is set out in the declaration, and allocated or assigned in which the locker are assigned on discretionary basis by the corporation. Condominium types. Um, there are a few types of condominium. One is a leasehold. A leasehold condominium is a condominium corporation in which all the units and their apparent common interests are subject to the leasehold interest by the owner. All leasehold interests in unit along with the common interest must be for the same term. Freehold. A standard condominium is a freehold condominium that is not the common element or a vacant land condominium. Condominium corporation created prior to the new Condominium Act coming into force are classified as a standard condominium. Freehold common elements. A common element condominium corporation consists of common interests only held by the owners in those common elements having no units. All references to unit or proposed unit in the Act are deemed to be references to the common elements in the corporation. The vacant land condominium is a condominium providing for the development or sale of units without the necessity of immediately completing the structures. Phase condominium. A phase condominium is a condominium corporation operating as a freehold corporation in which the declarant may create additional unit or common elements within the corporation. The term phase refers to additional unit and common elements that are created in accordance with the Act upon the registration of an amendment to both original description and the original declaration and the description. Condominium governance. A board of directors is elected in accordance with the Act and bylaws. The board consists of at least 3 persons or greater number as specified by the law. Directors are required to be of a minimum age of 18 and have the undischarged bankrupts or and cannot be undischarged bankrupt or mentally incompetent person. They are appointed for less than 3 years. Standard of care. So to recap, a condominium governance includes a board of directors, which consists of at least 3 members or greater, should be of more than 18 years of age, and cannot have undischarged bankruptcy or are mentally incompetent. A director ceases to be director if either of the two latter event occurs, or the individual concerned does not obtain a discharge from a lien within 90 days of the registration of that lien. Directors are appointed for 3 years or lesser period as specified in the bylaws. All businesses of a corporation is conducted at meetings of the board of directors. Directors must adhere to the standards of care in their role by acting honestly and in good faith, while exercising care, diligence, and skill of a reasonable person in carrying out their function. Directors may rely on good faith and financial statements, reports, or opinions of relevant experts, and should not be liable should a breach of duty occur. Director may be indemnified and saved harmless by the corporation, and the corporation may acquire appropriate insurance. However, such protections do not apply if the directors act dishonestly or not in the good faith. First director. The board of directors appointed by the declarant is required within 10 days following the condominium corporation. A board of director appointed by the declarant is required within 10 days following the condominium registration. The first board consists of at least 3 members who hold office until the turnover meeting. The first board must call for a meeting before the later of 30 days after the declarant transfer 20% of the units or 90 days after the first unit is transferred. Owners elect 2 directors who hold office in addition to the one appointed by the declarant. At the turnover meeting, there is election of a new board and declarant delivers declarant delivery of documents at the meeting within 30 days and within 90 days. So there are different sort of documents which are delivered at the meeting after 30 days of following the meeting and 90 days, within 60 days following the meeting. Bylaws. The bylaws are documented standard procedures and requirements regarding the condominium internal operations that involve governance, that is establishing procedure for borrowing funds, setting the director remuneration, and other regulatory matters. Bylaws are made, amended, and repealed by the board of directors and must be consistent with the law, with the act and the declaration. Bylaws are not effective unless the owners of the majority of the unit vote in favor. A copy must be registered in the land registry office. Registered bylaws are made by the declarants are valid until replaced. Rules. Rules are directive or regulations developed by a condominium corporation that promote safety, security, and welfare of the owners, as well as the property and the assets of the corporation. So the difference between bylaws and rules is that the bylaws are the standard procedures and requirements regarding the condominium internal operations that involve governance, and things of that nature. Well, the rules are the directives and regulations developed by the condominium corporation to promote safety, security, and welfare of the owners, as well as the property or assets of the corporation. Resale, the resale condominium agreement. Resale condominium pose unique challenges. Numerous rules, procedures, bylaws, and other documents impact both ownership rights and day-to-day activities. Further, the buyer is not only acquiring a unit but also the common interests and associated common expenses. Buyers must carefully consider financial well-being of the condominium corporation as well as how effectively it is managed. The sale of resale unit, the agreement of purchase and sale of condominium resale, a standard ODA form, is designed for resale condominium transaction. In addition to pre-printed clauses unique to this form, resale real estate register it clearly delineate what is included with the property, like the storage, locker, and parking spaces. Further improvements or additional additions completed by the owner should be discussed and duly noted. The status certificate issued by the condominium corporation sets out important details regarding the resale condominium unit and the condominium corporation. Drafting an agreement. The agreement of purchase and sale condominium resale differs in several aspects from the residential resale counterpart. A fully The major differences are the property description. Detailed property particulars includes the parking and the locker details. Clause 7, among the common expenses, seller warranty regarding amount of common expenses payable. There's also mention of the parking and the locker costs. Status certificate, seller warrants and represents that no special assessment is contemplated or any legal actions pending. Seller also warrants that no special meeting for condominium termination or any substantial changes or alteration, and approval of a condominium corporation is required, otherwise this agreement becomes null and void. So to recap, the major changes with the agreement of purchase and sale for condominium corporation, condominium resale or reform 101 is that there's a property description which includes parking and the locker details, and the seller warranty regarding the common elements, what amount of the common expenses, and also there's the mention of parking and locker and what are the assigned cost, and the seller warrants that there is no special assessment contemplated or legal action pending. Seller gives the consent to obtain status certificate by acknowledging that the condominium corporation may have entered into a management agreement. Seller represents that and warrants that no special meeting has been convened for condominium termination or any substantial changes or alteration. An agreement is null and void if approval is not given by the condominium corporation. Key consideration for the resale unit. Common expenses involve costs related to performance of the object and duties of the corporation. So common expenses involve the costs related to the performance and objects and duties of the corporation, including all expenses specified as common expenses in the act or in the declaration. The payment of common expenses and the amount of these expenses is an important consideration when purchasing condominium. Owner contribute common expenses in proportion outright to the declaration. Any default can result in a lien against the owner unit. which can be enforced in the same manner as a mortgage. No owner is exempt from this requirement, even if he or she has waived or abandoned the right to use common element, is making a claim against a corporation, or is restricted from such using such common elements. The right to register a lien for common expense areas previously limited to residential condominium in prior legislation and now include non-residential condominium lien. So any default um, in there can result in a lien or automatic unregistered lien. That this lien expires 3 months after the default occurs, unless the certificate of lien is registered by the corporation. The owner must be given written notice of the certificate of lien 10 days prior to the registration. The lien, when registered, so lien when it's registered covers default amount, interest, legal costs, and other reasonable expenses, and it has a priority over every registered or unregistered encumbrances except claim of the crown, etc., or the claim of for taxes, charges, rates, or assessment under various provincial statutes or a lien that is prescribed. So just to recap, in case there is a lien, uh, it has a priority over every registered or unregistered encumbrance except the claim of the crown, a claim for taxes, charges, rates, or assessment. Reserve fund. A reserve fund is used solely for the major repair or replacement of common elements. Statutory fund requirements, which is a greater, like major repair or replacement, or which is a greater of the either major repair or replacement, or 10% of the budgeted amount, um, based on the life expectancy. So the statutory fund requirement is the greater of the major repair or replacement based on the life expectancy requirement of 10% of the budgeted amount. Performance audits. A performance audit involves detailed examination and scrutiny of the common elements by an individual. This audit requires inspecting of major building components, reviewing condominium documentation, and conducting a survey of owners concerning damage or defects. The individual then prepares and submits a written report to the board of directors. Requirement for selected condominiums. Requirement concerning performance audit apply to condominium corporation when one or more unit used for residential purpose and common element condominium. Requirements concerning performance audit apply to condominium corporation with one or more unit used for residential purpose and common element condominium corporation. The person conducting the audit must hold a professional hold a certificate of authorization or professional engineers act or certificate of practice under the architects act. The auditor may enter the property at reasonable times, either alone or accompanied by appropriate expert, require the production of relevant documents, and make examination, tests, and inquiries deemed reasonable. Performance audit must be completed no less than 10 months following the registration of declaration and description. The audit is designed to reveal deficiencies that may arise to the new home, that might give rise to the new home warranty claim, whether or not the corporation falls under that program. The reader is the new home coverage is provided by Trillion Warranty Corporation that is restricted to new residential condominium and is subject to other qualifying criteria. The auditor may enter the property at any reasonable time. Status certificate. The status certificate provides a wealth of information for a resale buyer. The certificate is a document containing information regarding the operational, legal, and financial dimension of a condominium corporation. The corporation is required to give each person so requesting a status certificate, and a prescribed fee not to exceed $100 can be charged. The content of the status certificate are limited to should include but is not limited to the corporation address for service, statement of a common expenses, account payable by unit for common expenses, particular of an increase in the common expenses for the unit, statement concerning any assessment relating to the reserve fund, information concerning any application regarding the amendment to the declaration, details of outstanding judgment, status of any legal action, current budget and the most detailed audited statement, copy of the current declaration, a listing of various current agreement, statement that the person requesting the certificate has the right to inspect agreements, owner compliance with the current agreement, particular concerning the most recent reserve fund study and amount of the fund, including any current plans to increase the fund, number of unit lease for the fiscal year preceding the certificate date, certificate or memorandum, any planned proposed audition, a proposed assessment if the court has appointed an inspector pursuant to the Act. Persons paying the fee for the certificate can, upon request, also inspect certain agreements like management and insurance. Copies will be furnished for a fee. Upon written request, the name and address for service of the corporation directors and officers and the person responsible for the management and individual delegated to provide status certificate can also be obtained. Certificate not provided. The Act also sets out the requirements in the event that the information is omitted or the certificate is not provided. If any information is omitted, the statute provides us that the certificate stated there is no such information. When the certificate is requested and not provided within the prescribed time limit, the Act states that the certificate is deemed to have been provided and no default in common expenses has occurred, no increase in common expenses has occurred, and no levies have been assessed against the unit. Use restriction. Use restrictions are the limitation placed on the unit owners as found in the declaration, bylaws, and our rules. They are established internally by declarants and modified by condominium corporation. For example, no pets, no pets like while backing on exterior while backing exterior drapery of material in the initial move-in, no outside installation, parking for private passengers, and so on. Special clauses. Common element clause has been developed for the use with agreement of purchase and sale with when vehicle property is being sold and the property referred to as a parcel of tied land includes an interest in the common element condominium corporation. For example, a seller may be selling his or her home and that home is tied to the ownership interest in the nearby golf course, that is the common element condominium. Seller property information statement and schedule. Many issues covered can be effectively addressed at the point of listing by using seller property information statement or Form 220 and the associated seller property statement schedule for condominium. This schedule attached to and forming part of the SPIAs addresses matters such as the fee, spatial assessment, pending lawsuits, or any matter impacting resale condominium. Condominium termination. A condominium corporation can be terminated in 4 ways: consent, sale of property, substantial damage, or court application. A consent is required of the owners of at least 80% of the unit for the 80% of the persons having registered claims against the property created following registration of the declaration and document must also give consent. So it's both unit owners and also the people having registered claims. Sale of the property. The Act ceases to govern the condominium if the property as a whole is sold. If the part is sold, the Act ceases to govern that part. 80% majority vote is required. Owners of at least 80% of the unit. If the common elements are being sold, are only only for use of owners of specific unit, and those owners may consent to sale subject to the other provisions in the Act. When there is substantial damage, if a condominium suffers a substantial damage, the board of directors may assess the scope of the damage and determine if it's substantial. Substantial for the purpose of the act is when the cost to repair equals or exceeds 25% of the replacement cost of the building and the structures on the property. The owner can are then notified accordingly. Upon receipt of such notice, the owners can request a meeting within 30 days. If the owners of at least 80% of the unit consent, the notice of termination may be registered within 30 days. If no vote occurs in the favor of the termination, the corporation is obligated to make necessary repairs. Court application. So to recap, the declaration and description are the key documentation in the condominium registration. Condominiums go through much the same process from planning perspective as do the plans of subdivision. All newly built condominium must comply with the Ontario Building Code. Residential condominium must also comply with the Trillion Warranty Corporation requirement. A condominium consists of a unit exclusively occupied by owners, except in the case of common element condominium and common elements held by the owners at tenant in common. Use and ownership of parking and storage area varies. Owned and exclusive use common elements are most commonly found in Ontario. Condominium can be briefly divided into leasehold and freehold. Freehold includes standard, common elements, and vacant land and phase condominium corporation. Board of directors selected in accordance with the Condominium Act must adhere to the standard of care when performing their duties. Primary documents for governance purpose include declaration, bylaws, and rules. Agreement of purchase and sale, condominium resale form 101 generally parallels the agreement of purchase and sale, but important clauses have been added. Reserve fund creation and management are statutorily set out in the Act. City certificate must be provided within 10 days of the request, and payment for appropriate fee less than equal to 100. Buyers should carefully review all condominium documentation, particularly use restrictions in the declaration by the laws and rules. Owner alteration additions can prove troublesome at the point of closing if proper procedures are not followed. That's all for Chapter 2, Residential Condominium. Thanks.